So imagine your brain is like Play-Doh when you're a little kid. It is super flexible and can be shaped into all sorts of cool things. This flexibility is called neuroplasticity. Basically, when you're young, your brain is like a sponge soaking up everything around you. Whether you're learning to walk, talk, or even play a new game, your brain is busy making connections and building pathways. Just like how you can mold Play-Doh into different shapes, your brain changes and grows based on what you do and what you learn. So every time you try something new or practice a skill, you're literally shaping your brain. Isn't that awesome? That's why it's so important to have fun, explore, learn lots of different things when you're little. Because you're not just having fun, you're also helping your brain grow stronger and smarter. So neuroplasticity is like your brain's superpower. It means that your brain can change and grow based on whatever you're learning. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to grow physically, structurally, and to even move its function from one area to another. Therefore, it is of two types: functional plasticity and structural plasticity. Functional plasticity is the brain's ability to move functions from a damaged area of the brain to other undamaged areas, while structural plasticity is the brain's ability to change its physical structure due to learning. A child's brain grows rapidly during the first few years of life. A neuron in the cerebral cortex has 2,500 synapses at birth. By the age of 3, this number has grown to a total of 15,000 synapses per neuron. Adults, on the other hand, have only about half of that number of synapses. As we gain new experiences and grow, some neural connections are strengthened, while others are eliminated. This process is called synaptic pruning. Neurons that are used frequently develop stronger connections and remain in the brain. Those that are rarely or never used eventually die. By developing new connections and pruning away weak ones, the brain can adapt to its changing environment. Neuroplasticity has many real-life benefits, and here are a few. Treating acute or chronic pain. We experience and interpret pain in our brains, so addressing the brain's health can be a path to healing acute or chronic pain. And we see some stroke patients recover through this. Chronic pain is the result of new pain pathways created by the brain, and it is made worse by inflammation, the body's immune system's response to an irritant. Reducing inflammation reduces pain in more ways than one. Now, certain foods can strengthen our brain's ability to make neuroplastic changes, ultimately helping the brain rewire or rewrite pathways associated with pain. This means one of the most powerful tools to combat inflammation doesn't come from the pharmacy, but rather from the grocery store. Harvard Medical School has found that these foods are best to combat inflammation through neuroplastic changes. Number 1 is olive oil. Number 2 is green leafy vegetables such as spinach, kale, and collards. Number 3, nuts like almonds and walnuts. Number 4, fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, tuna, sardines. And number 5 is fruits such as strawberries, blueberries, cherries, and oranges. Next, we look at increasing intelligence. How does neuroplasticity play a role in increasing intelligence? Now remember the experiment that we have already gone through, where Laszlo has proven how he turned his 3 daughters into chess prodigies. In 2008, a groundbreaking study discovered that intelligence is fluid. and can be increased with proper stimulus. By fluid, they are trying to say that it is flexible and it can be stretched or increased or shaped in any way you want. Since then, scientists have changed their fundamental view of many years that human intelligence could not be improved. One example is London cab drivers who must memorize over 320 main routes, 25,000 streets, and 20,000 landmarks for a geography test called the Knowledge. Researchers were curious to see what happened to their brains over 3 to 4 years of studying. They found that the hippocampus, the part of the brain dealing with memory, grew tremendously in size over this time. Moreover, many children are led to believe that intelligence and other talents are fixed traits rather than cultivable abilities. However, research has shown that when students are taught about brain plasticity and how their intelligence is not fixed, it makes a dramatic impact on their morale, and it can even help kids raise their IQs through the simple understanding that they have the potential to get smarter and do better in school. And they did. It only takes the knowledge of neuroplasticity and determination to rewire our brains that may allow us to change our lives forever. I used to think that stomach is the only organ in the body that can be stretched as we eat. And stretched and stretched and stretched. But holes for the brain too. And guess what? It is way better to stretch the brain than the tummy. Let's have a recap. Use it or lose it principle. Neural circuits not actively engaged in task performance for an extended period of time begin to degrade. An example of this might be seen in the treatment of a patient who requires G-tube feeding due to an inability to feed orally. Over time, the circuits responsible for swallowing mechanism may actually begin to degrade due to lack of use. Subsequently, when that patient is able to begin to swallow again, they may require additional time and trials to re-establish this process, as these circuits may be a bit rusty. Use it and improve it. Training that drives a specific brain function can lead to enhancement of that function. An example of this can be highlighted from the previous discussion of a stroke patient who may have lost use of a particular side of their body and may be neglecting that side or not using it because it is simply too difficult. In the treatment setting, a technique known as constraint-induced movement therapy or CIMT can be used to restrain the arm on the non-affected side so that the patient is compelled to use their affected limb as much as possible and improve its function. Specificity. The nature of training experience dictates the nature of the plasticity. Tailoring an activity or exercise to produce a result in specific circuitry. Physical exercise can be utilized to promote vascular growth if that is your aim. By the same token, exercises and modalities geared towards enhancing swallowing might also be related to the circuitry involved in producing speech, but may not necessarily generalize to actually producing speech. Repetition matters. Induction of plasticity requires sufficient repetition. One of the changes for therapists in the rehabilitation environment can often revolve around being able to quantify how much time or how many sessions of specific therapy a patient needs to recover certain skills. Stakeholders, especially insurance representatives and the patients themselves, want to know how long is it going to take to get better. The truth is, we don't know these actual numbers, but we do know from research and study that thousands and tens of thousands of repetitions of certain activities are needed to generate these changes. Because of this, it may take utilizing techniques such as combining therapies to provide patients the opportunities for sufficient repetitions of skills. For example, to get those thousands of steps that a patient may need to learn to walk again, a physical therapist may have the patient walking in and between their other therapies during the day, or making sure they are getting up and out of their wheelchair when they are not in their PT session. By the same token, a physical therapist could help out the speech therapist by having the patient work on memory or path-finding activities during their PT session. Intensity also matters. Induction of plasticity requires sufficient intensity. The question of proper therapy intensity follows this concept of repetition as well. What is the proper dosage of therapy necessary? How many sessions? How long should these sessions be? More intensive the therapy program, the more likely a person is to achieve results, and the more likely these changes can be maintained over time. Time matters. Different forms of plasticity occur at different times during recovery. This principle is based on the idea that after an injury, the brain really wants to recover. So it makes sense that the earlier you provide the opportunity for recovery through these neuroplastic changes, the better. The early versus late approach is especially important to support the beginning treatment before maladaptive behaviors have a chance to spring up. Salience matters. The training experience must be sufficiently salient to induce plasticity. What the person takes away from the training experience and what it means to them can affect their recovery. It is important for the therapist to know what is important to the patient, as emotions can modulate the strength of training, or for example, something like memory consolidation. If the therapist can make the training or information salient and important to the patient, they can more easily remember skills or pieces of information that are important to them, as their brains are often already overwhelmed with input. Age matters. Training-induced plasticity occurs more readily in younger brains. Younger brains are already more plastic and adaptive to change than older brains, which is important to keep in mind when working with older versus younger patients. Transference or generalization. Plasticity in response to one training experience can enhance acquisition of similar behaviors in the training process. Therapist needs to have an eye toward how a particular skill or activity can be generalized or transferred to real-world activities, such as increased independence in the home environment. Interference. Plasticity in response to one training experience can impede acquisition of similar behaviors. When patients are actually able to come in for neurological treatment and that treatment is delayed, they often come in with compensatory behaviors for skill deficits, having already learned a different way of compensating, but which may not be the best. With this, some of the challenges to learning the best way to regain a skill may involve unlearning some of these previously acquired behaviors. According to the early theories, researchers believed that changes in the brain could only take place during infancy and childhood. And by early adulthood, it was believed that the brain's physical structure was mostly permanent. In 2007, Norman Doidge suggested that this belief that the brain was incapable of change primarily stemmed from three major sources: ancient sources, inability to actually observe the microscopic activities of the brain, and the observation that people who had suffered serious brain damage were often unable to recover. Psychologist William James suggested that the brain was perhaps not as unchanging as previously believed. Way back in 1890, in his book The Principles of Psychology, he wrote, "Organic matter, especially nervous tissue, seems endowed with a very extraordinary degree of plasticity." However, this idea went largely ignored for many years. I don't know why all good things get ignored for a very long time. So, modern theories. What are the modern theories? In 1920s, researcher Carl Lashley found evidence of changes in neural pathways of rhesus monkeys. By the 1960s, researchers began to explore cases in which older adults who had suffered massive strokes were able to regain functioning, demonstrating that the brain was more malleable than previously believed. Modern researchers have also found evidence that the brain is able to rewire itself following damage. Now we have evidence that the brain can rewire and create new neural pathways and alter existing ones in order to adapt to new experiences, learn new information, and create new memories. Thanks to advance in technology, researchers are able to get new, never before possible look at the brain's inner workings. As the study of modern neuroscience flourishes, research has demonstrated that people are not limited to the mental abilities they are born with, and that the damaged brains are often quite capable of remarkable changes. Every experience changes our brain. Every experience can change our brain function. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt due to experience. It is basically an umbrella term referring to the brain's ability to change, reorganize, and grow neural networks. This can involve functional changes and structural changes, and it is called plasticity because of its ability to stretch and mold and adapt. But the stimuli have to be strong enough, repeated enough, and time appropriate. The human brain is composed of approximately 100 billion neurons. Early researchers believed that neurogenesis, or the creation of new neurons, stopped shortly after birth. Today, it is understood that the brain's neuroplasticity allows it to reorganize pathways and create new connections, and in some cases even create new neurons. Remember the keywords: exposure, experience, strength of experience, and duration of experience. So why are we talking so much about neuroplasticity? This is because the ability to change lies in neuroplasticity. The ability to learn new things, the ability to enhance existing cognitive capabilities, recovery from stroke and traumatic brain injuries, strengthening areas of expertise or function that were lost or have declined, or to acquire new functions and new habits, improvements that can boost the brain fitness. All this and more are seated in the neuroplasticity function of the brain. There are few defining characteristics like age and environment. As we have discussed, age and environment play a role. While plasticity occurs throughout the lifetime, certain types of changes are more predominant in the specific ages. The brain tends to change a great deal during the early years of life. For example, as the immature brain grows and organizes itself, the earlier you introduce certain stimuli, the likely it would be for the changes to take place at a faster or a rapid pace, and it is more likely that they will be more enhanced, greater in permanence. So if you want to introduce some permanent changes, if you want to induce permanent changes in the brain of a child, it is important that you introduce specific stimuli at an early age. You expose the child's brain to certain stimuli, to required desired stimuli for the desired outcome at an early age, because that is the time when the brain is at its softest and it can be molded into any mold, any shape or form. Genetics also have an influence, and the interaction between the environment and genetics also plays a role in shaping the brain's plasticity. Neuroplasticity is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. It takes place throughout life. Brain cells of an adult also have this ability of neuroplasticity. However, after a certain age, the neuroplasticity will be a little bit difficult or might take a little more effort, more repetitions, more stimuli or stronger stimuli, and more time will be required for an adult to have the same result as opposed to a child. Damage to key areas of the brain can result in deficits in those areas because while some recovery may be possible, other areas of brain simply cannot fully take over those functions that were affected by damage. This shows us that it is better not to create negative impact, negative memories, not to damage the brain of a child or any human being, because the damage control is worse than, like prevention is better. Prevention is always better than cure. How can we improve neuroplasticity? The best and top of the list for any amount of articles or any amount of videos that I've gone through, top of the list always comes learning a new language or an instrument or traveling, exploring, experiencing, creating crafts, art, reading. But learning a new language has been proven to increase the gray matter of the brain and hence improves the neuroplasticity. Learning a new skill, learning a new language. Teach your children Arabic at a very early age. Teach your children languages at a very early age. From the time that you start teaching them ABC, teach them Alif Ba Ta. Teach them Arabic. Let them listen to Arabic children's songs, poems, Arabic videos, Arabic nasheeds, Arabic. Teach them Arabic. Teach them other languages if you want. Increase their neuroplasticity through languages. Because at an early age, they can go through, they can improve, they can absorb a lot more than we can imagine. Physical exercise also has an amazing effect on increasing the neuroplasticity of the brain because it improves the blood supply to the brain. Any activity that improves the blood supply of the brain will help you improve neuroplasticity. Exercise is one thing that affects every system of the body, and the brain is no exception. So regular exercise improves. Some research indicates that exercise might help prevent neuron loss in key areas of the hippocampus, which is the key area involved with neuroplasticity. If you remember, I said the word hippocampus when we spoke about the taxi drivers in London and how it had become bigger than normal people. So the hippocampus, the part of the brain involved in memory and functions, it improves just by exercise. In a study conducted in 2021, physical exercise also appeared to boost brain plasticity through its impact on brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that impacts nerve growth, functional connectivity, and the basal ganglia, the part of the brain responsible for motor control and learning. The US Department of Health and Human Services recommends getting at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio exercise such as walking, swimming, cycling per week, and a minimum of 2 days of strength training exercises, lifting weights, or doing body weight exercises. And practicing mindfulness also has a great effect in boosting the brain's neuroplasticity. So please take the time out for exercise in your life so that you can increase your neuroplasticity and that of your child's. You might have heard the saying, all play and no work makes Jack a dull boy. We can easily say that all work and no play also makes Jack a dull boy. And it is even better if you have a good routine of physical exercise together, like walks in nature or running around, walking in the garden, or a park together. Think about it on your own. Is it easier to create new pathways, or is it easier to deconstruct already existing pathways and then construct new pathways in their place? Let me give you an example. Building a house over a piece of virgin land or empty land, is that easier? Or if you wish to build a building over a place where there already exists another building, first you will have to take the pain of breaking the first building down. It will not only take more pain, but effort and time as well. So first you break down the building, and then you make another building. Let this be one of the biggest lessons that we take away from this module. Let us realize the importance of creating positive neural connections versus bad ones from the get-go. It is extremely important to create good pathways, healthy pathways. And it is easier and less painful to create new pathways from scratch than to create new pathways after removing existing habits and pathways. So let's avoid making bad memories, scars, and trash that would be very painful and time consuming for us to remove. It is much easier to protect, prevent, preserve than to treat, replace, remove, and heal. Have you heard about the stories of the Hufaz? That by the time they were done with almost half or most of the Quran, they were actually learning much faster and much more. Like some of them even said that they were learning a juz a day. Since they don't know about neuroplasticity, they only talk about barakah. Yes, barakah is also the word, but the scientific word would be neuroplasticity. When they spent so many hours, so many days, and so many repetitions learning the Quran, their neuroplasticity towards the Quran improved. So if you think about the promise of Allah about multiplying whatever is spent in His way sincerely, then you understand how much a child's brain can improve by improving their neuroplasticity when you make them study Quran from a very early age. Unfortunately, some parents don't teach children Quran for the fear of poverty because they see that some shuyukh or some Quran teachers are poor. If money was the measure or the yardstick with which we measure intelligence, all prophets would be the richest men that ever lived in terms of money. But they were the richest in terms of Iman, but they were modest in dunya. They were richest in their ranks in the sight of Allah. And on the Day of Judgment, when we see their ranks, we would wish that we had also tried or aimed at those ranks. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, spend of that which you love, the most lovable thing that we have in this life is our children. Let us spend the time and energies of our children in learning the Quran from a very early age. We teach them 10, 20, 30 years the knowledge of how to live in dunya, and that knowledge will only help them survive for another 20, 30, 40 years. That's it. Let us invest in their akhirah.